Welcome to the Talk Lab podcast. Today we're talking with Mike Mantzke, Chief Executive Officer of Global Data Sciences. Mike helps business leaders understand the impact data has on their businesses, and especially how data will affect their image and bottom line. And Jim Schweizer, lead AI product developer and researcher with Global Data Sciences. Jim is a digital entrepreneur and tech professional with experience in generative AI as it relates to community engagement and government affairs, just to name a few of the areas of his expertise. Today, we're talking about how to empower our Aurora neighbors with generative AI. So the big question for everybody, and anytime you're asked a specific question, you always have to go to the dictionary and look it up. But what is the dictionary definition of generative AI?
Well, we actually asked that question to Bard and Claude a minute ago, and it came up with the same answer, which is generative AI is simply a way for a computer to respond to a human prompt to create something, whether that's text or image or a video. Mm-hmm. So it's an emerging technology. It's going to be disruptive. And everybody's definition will be slightly different as to what generative AI is going to do for us.
That's right. Yeah, it'll quickly become application defined, but right now it's basically a learning machine.
Right.
That's got a huge, and if we look at chat, if one of the most common, it's going to be that it's learning on a database of the internet.
Right. And it all comes down to the data that the AI was trained on.
That's right. So that's the big question. So for municipalities, Aurora specifically, the community, constituents own the data. Like we're a democracy, so we own the data.
Yes. Right.
So you would think that the easy sort of thought here is that the data that the community owns becomes the data set that we train our specific Aurora AI module on, and then we grow as a community, right? Is that the simple
Well, that's
way
a
of
very simple explanation for a very complicated process, because data has a life cycle. Mm-hmm. And we have to learn about the life cycle. We have to learn about what data we can trust, what data is untrustworthy, what actually gets into the training data set. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of effort that goes into planning that before you even get to the training of the model.
Right. And that's really interesting too, because the way that we've been collecting data hasn't had we haven't had a reason to collect it for a particular outcome. So now we have this. We kind of have the answer for what smart cities are now.
Yep.
Right?
Well, if you look at the city planning process, every 10 or 15 years, they come up with a brand new master plan for the downtown area, for example. Each time they do that, they're using a slightly different data set. Mm-hmm. So the data has to be updated, has to reflect the current situation in Aurora. Mm-hmm. So when we talk about generative AI, we don't want to be using a lot of outdated data, and we want to be very careful about where the data comes from. And we want to be very careful that everybody in Aurora is represented by that data.
Mm-hmm. So Mike, in your experience with data science, has there ever been a moment like there is now?
Over time, yes, except the process has been greatly accelerated. Mm-hmm. I mean, at a scale I've never seen before. And it will continue to do so. Mm-hmm. And there's one thing that I want to just make clear is, and this is in reference to the municipal data component. Mm-hmm. Okay, that data does belong to us as the taxpayers, as the consumers, and so forth. And we need to make best use of it in order to enhance and expand the community.
Yeah, and so the condition is we can't really point fingers at anyone because we've all just arrived here as humanity.
That's right.
There's
We're all
no
exploring this together.
It's nobody's fault. But this becomes the new opportunity to say, how do we design forward?
Right.
And that's what you guys are really wanting the community to understand.
We want the community to understand that there's certain inherent dangers involved in this that we need to be aware of. Not that it's going to cause any major problems, but if the data isn't correct, then you're off on the wrong foot. So if you have underrepresented parts of your city that aren't using technology, how do they show up in the data set? Mm-hmm. So there are some very basic questions that we need to ask, and then we need to find the answers before we start training the AI.
Right.
And if I could just jump in reference to data and the value and so forth and so on. From an innovation perspective, all right, if you think about it back in the day, way back, somebody could be walking down the road and they find a rock and they pick it up. And they could decide what they're going to use that rock for. They could either toss it, or use it as a tool or whatever. With the acceleration that we're seeing, right now with AI and so forth, I think it's a critical point in our history where, we have the opportunity to take that, okay? Yes, it could be weaponized, all right? Or we can take it and really use it to move things forward at an accelerated level that we should as humans.
Mm-hmm. But again, that rock is, people put them in gardens now.
Mm-hmm.
They grind them up and make them into all kinds of different things. I think this laptop probably has some rocks in it, some
Somewhere.
Sand in there somewhere.
Yeah. So obviously with the simple concept of we have now computer-generated, computer-aided learning, so we can ask it lots of different questions about data sets. And it behooves a community like Aurora, because we don't want to become, I've heard many times people say we don't want to be in the rust belt of technology here. Right. This is the, and we asked the question, I think Mike Piggies did a great job of bringing smart city thinking to basically the consciousness of the community and to leadership. But this is the answer. Like, if they were looking for an answer, it is basically generative AI. So now we need to get down to the question of, like, it's going to start with the youngest constituents in our community because it's going to affect them the most. But how would you recommend schools start thinking about their role in this?
That is a huge question, and I'm not sure that I'm qualified to answer how a teacher and their students will interact with this, because that really hasn't been described yet.
No.
And what we're looking at right now is just baby steps into the prompt engineering of how we're going to make these generative AIs do things for us. Everyone talks about, I understand prompt engineering, and then they pivot to ChatGPT. But ChatGPT is one of a multitude of language models that you could use for this process. And prompting styles will be different depending on the model that you use. So when schools are adopting something like AI, they have a lot of choices to make. They have to choose a model. They have to choose how the model gets trained. They have to choose how the students are going to interact with it. They have to choose what kind of output are they looking for, because programming probably isn't the skill that you want to teach your students anymore. Right? So there's a lot of changes coming up.
Yeah, there are a lot of changes, but I say it all the time, and I do a lot of tongue-in-cheek with this because it makes sense to me. It's basically a philosophical opportunity, but the question is like, again, it's a calculator for thinking.
Yes.
But so at the very least, go back into the community issue is, what data are we collecting? What are we teaching students to collect? How do they collect data? We used to call that research.
Right.
But what data could schools be thinking about collecting that they may even want to, train a module on or down the road? But like, what data would you collect if you were a school administrator?
Well, again, it's going to depend on the school. Okay, it's also going to depend a little bit on the educational culture, that you're trying to present, and it's just critical to remember that we should never assume similarity when we're working with various schools or educators or so forth, because everybody's got their own, if you will, idea. Okay, and when you get down to prompt engineering, which Jim mentioned. The interesting part about that is context is critical when you're developing the prompts and so forth, and you're trying to get the true value out of the process. And those are things that we're going to have to work with educators on, so that if we go back and we take a look at the COVID and the impact of COVID on the educational system, all right, nobody was ready for that. They weren't, not at the scale that it impacted everyone. All right. Well, now we come out of that, and we've got a fantastic piece of innovation, which is just accelerating, and that's the AI component. And we've got to be able to try to get everybody not necessarily on the same page, okay, but try to get them to understand the thought processes required to take that to the next step.
Right.
And it's not just the educators that need to be part of this. Everybody needs to be part of this. It's not just the students, it's the students' parents, it's the older brothers and sisters. It's true. Literally everybody in the city has a stake in what happens here.
Yeah, and to further that too, it's kind of, again, the outcome. What is the... So if you have a community like Aurora, we have some obvious pillars that we could focus on. We could focus on economic development. We could focus on the design of education. Like, it is an opportunity to redesign it and think about how learning outcomes are maybe tied to the collection of data and then the analysis of it. There's so much thinking here. So this is the age-old question. The administrators, the people running education in our community right now have a lot on their plate. Mm-hmm. So how would you recommend the community as it relates to a diversity of thinking, maybe some strengths that could come to the table? What kind of people should step up and start getting involved in this?
All of them. But we have some specific issues in Aurora that we do need to address. Mm-hmm. Part of it is accessibility to technology. Mm-hmm. How many people at the beginning of COVID had some real problems making that switch to remote learning or remote work, or they have they don't have access, they don't have a laptop, they don't have a lot of things. So when we talk about how do we educate the educators, how do we educate the students, it's not just the educators and the students, it's literally our entire population needs to be a part of this. So how does that happen? Really the only way that happens is community engagement activities, whether it's seminars, whether it's community groups getting together and somehow somebody facilitating the discussion that needs to happen for what's next.
Right, and we've talked about that. I know that we're all passionate about this. This isn't something that just surprised us. We knew this was coming. So, the question becomes like, when you think of everyone getting involved, that's the entire population. So if we kind
nobody is left behind in
no
this.
one's left behind, and we scale that down to kind of the early adoption. So who do you think the early adopters might be that are ready and willing to not prescribe solutions already, but to consider what they could be?
I have some statistics that we could bring out that show that 2% of cities, for example, have actually adopted something AI related, but 60% of cities are looking at it right now. So there's a lot of people who are pondering, how do I do this? What do I need to do? What does my output look like? But it's at the very beginning stages. So we have the opportunity now to literally build the roadmap moving forward for something that is going to change our lives completely.
Yeah, and that is another thing where you guys have a long history here in Aurora. Mike, your family had property that is up near Mooseheart, that property there back in
generations,
the day, generations ago. So long history. Jim, same with you. Your family's long standing here?
Well, not in Aurora, but in the Midwest.
Okay, in the Midwest. Yeah. So when we think about our economy, when we think about things we don't manufacture like we used to, Aurora was a big manufacturing town. So the next evolution of our economy, the forward movement, how much do you think it's dependent on our grasp of AI?
I think it's significant because if we ignore it, which a lot of people do, they think, oh, you know what, the next thing will just come along. They'll come up with a new version of Alexa. I'll use that as one. But at the end of the day, we have to embrace it. Yeah. If we don't, we will get left behind. Yeah.
So just maybe give a quick kind of a couple of I don't think it's fearfulness. I think it's an opportunity. But what are some of the opportunities that should help people or maybe encourage them to look beyond sort of the obvious like Alexa or Siri or just those simple corporate applications and a broader opportunities as it relates to AI?
That's one of those questions for the ages.
Yeah, that's a big one. I know.
It is a big one. And, I can tell you for what we witnessed in reference to COVID, and this is businesses and so forth, that, and if you think about it, so you're a company and you've got 200 people under one roof working. COVID came along and immediately a lot of businesses, half of you people are going to have to go and wait this out. The other half of the people, now we're down to 100, you have to go work from home. And there were a couple of just really interesting things that we witnessed firsthand, and that is that the people that had to go and try to work from home, if they were lucky, 35% might have been able to do that because nobody was prepped for that. But here's the critical factor. So COVID impacted a business. And so let's say you had somebody sitting in finance or in marketing or sales or whatever, and they've been doing that role for decades. Well, now all of a sudden they're out of the loop. And the business has got to figure out kind of which end is up in reference to try to keeping their businesses going. And we were able to help a lot of companies with that. But that is something we saw, was that the human factor, was removed in a lot of cases because of COVID. And there wasn't the right mechanisms put in place to kind of, bring that into focus and so forth. Now, AI could have certainly helped with that. And yes, the technology did exist from the perspective of trying to help, but the problem is a lot of C-suite executives and so forth weren't aware of it, or we'd seen it too, dismissed it. Oh, this will pass, or well, unfortunately, we'll just throw that in the IT guy's lap and they can handle it. All right. Well, if they don't have the type of experience in moving materials and so forth and so on, they had to try to take that on. So, yep.
Yeah. So the question of what questions to ask of AI, I think, are the ones that are out there right now. That's what it is at this point.
You can literally ask an AI anything. The question is whether you're going to get a good answer back.
Right? And what you're going to activate.
And what you're going to do with it, right?
And to Jim's point, you have to be able to challenge the answer, or at least have the right mechanisms in place to make sure you're not following some false direction.
And that brings up the whole issue of trust, right? Can you trust the model? But to trust the model, you have to trust the data. And to trust the data, you have to have accountability and transparency into where the data came from.
Right.
And all of those steps need to be steps that are open to the public, so that when the AI tool gets rolled out, they can say, I know how this tool is built. I can trust this tool to do something useful for me.
Right. And that kind of goes back again to if there's any type of, if anyone's collecting the data and there isn't transparency there, I mean, like full transparency that we haven't seen before in society, really. But no one, and that becomes the proof, right? And that's sort of the scientific, process in and of itself. Like you need to see what it is that you're testing. And if you know that you're collecting demographic data, you can make that available in a portal that everybody knows and it could be, if you're going to put smart sensors out and we're measuring traffic data, we're measuring weather, we're measuring economic indicators, all of those things become the assurance to the constituents that the data set is solid, and then the outcomes can be thought through.
So I want to give the city of Aurora some really good kudos here, because they do have an open portal on the city's website. We do have things like economic development data available to us. We have statistics from the Aurora Police Department on service calls and things like that. So we're making some significant progress as a city toward meeting some of these AI goals. But as a city, we need to have conversations about how we're going to move forward next. And I mean that as a city, everyone in the city, as a community. There's a slight difference between what is a city and what is a community, right? The city being the legislative, administrative part of things, but the community being the people. And we need to activate the people so that they can tell the city what needs to be done.
Yeah, what they want to collect.
Right.
What they want information about.
Right.
And again, there has been a lot on everyone's plate for now decades. We really ask hard questions about smart city development, but it was mostly hardware.
Right.
And now we're at the point where, with a lot of that infrastructure in place, big data centers, we have all that infrastructure. Now the question is collect and make sure the transparency is there, and then run the sets.
As this as the AI gets built into everything that we use, it's really simple to use. There's no barrier to entry. There's not a hard climb to understand how to use AI. So everybody can use it. It's just a question of getting people on the same page to understand what's next and why certain issues are very important to us.
Okay, so that comes to the next stage of sort of logic here, but like, why should people care? How is it going to affect their survivability? Like if in marketing, you're generally answering the question of, does this product or service help somebody survive? That's really the trigger. So why would the community care as it relates to themselves and their family?
I think part of the discovery would be, and this is on the community side, they may find all of a sudden a lot of things they were not aware of. Okay. And they could take that and, use that to better the community, or at least put the questions out there that, hey, what are we doing here? Or more importantly, why are we doing this versus doing that?
And what are our goals?
What are the goals? Yes, to your point.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah. So you're saying that if someone's asked or the community's asked, the constituents are asked, they're going to come up with, through just that thinking, things that they it's going to be things they've never even thought about because they've never been asked. And not, again, because, people haven't done that because there hasn't been any reason to ask. Nobody knows what to do with municipal data necessarily. I mean, there are businesses and there are reasons and outcomes to know what data is, but the way that AI can affect, just the choices you would make in giving your kids direction about what park district classes, opportunities they could have, or if they're interested in some different discipline, a good community data set, they could easily search in an instance and know that this is the best athletic program or best course of action locally for my kids, right?
And keep in mind that this is a rapidly changing environment. So the generative AI responses that you're getting today are going to look very different 6 months and a year from now, especially when some of these newer models start presenting a multimodal response to you. So they're going to actually create the video on demand and show you the video of how you do something. So you're not necessarily going to be going to YouTube and looking for the video, how do I fix my car? You're going to ask the AI, how do I fix my car? And then that AI is going to literally create content for you, showing you exactly what you need to do to fix your car. So that kind of thinking needs to be part of our process because it's not just a text answer anymore. It's going to be a all-inclusive kind of answer that may even include the code for how you do something, right? So you're no longer just going to be getting text back. You're going to be getting a solution back.
Right.
And that's going to be different too.
The interesting thing about that too is not to lose sight of the end consumer, the person in the community that maybe they have a strong technical background. Maybe they don't. Okay. But in developing the process as well as engineering any solutions, it's important to take that into account.
But I mean, if you're a hammer, you always see his nails. So you guys are engineers. I'm more of a, sort of a creative philosopher about things. So I see AI in, again, every discipline, every individual is going to see a use for it because it's essentially a consciousness around a data set. That's what it is. It's not, there's not a soul in it. That's not what we're looking at here, but we're looking at a thought calculator.
Right.
But you are looking at it, I think, Mike, if you can engineer it, and then you can have design thinking around that, other designers or what other disciplines can we throw out? Like, I think the real estate market.
Music, it's creating art, it's creating all kinds of things that we normally would associate with creatives, but now it's taking the creative tool and giving the creators even more tools to play with.
Right. Well, even think about, again, real estate. So I throw that out. If you loaded into the data set just a myriad of real estate parameters for Aurora. We have this downtown that needs more occupancy. We want, we've looked at big projects that are housing, and people have always gone to the table and thought.
And we have a parking problem. We don't have enough people parking down here. I mean, we can use this in all kinds of different ways.
Yeah. So you could ask, what can you lay out for us a 5-year plan?
Exactly. And the great thing about this is people are worried about their jobs. When an AI is creating work for us at a rapid pace, all you have to do is say, give me a 15-step plan for accomplishing goal A.
Yeah.
And now you still have to go out and accomplish goal A.
Yeah.
You have the plan, but the human still has to do it.
That's right. For me, it's a coach. It's just a coach. It's something that you can go to and say, hey, I'm thinking about this. Can you give me an outline for it, or a timetable, or can you budget it? I mean, there's so many great applications for this. So what do we think we do next? Like at this moment right now, if we could get, again, those early adopters excited, do you think it's getting together and
I think it all goes back to community engagement.
Right.
And it needs to come from the community. It's not a top-down situation here. It's an empowering and firing up the community to get really active in their future, because this is their future.
It really is.
And we've started that process. We began that last year, just trying to pull aspects of the community together so we could get some input as well as observation and so forth.
So the first meeting you had, you met with a group of people from the community. What kind of outcomes, what kind of questions, and what was that response like?
It was fun. It was a bit of an experiment. We had about 25 or 30 people together in the room discussing AI in its form in November. The biggest takeaway, I think, from that is the understanding that we need to plan for our future. We can't just let this happen. There are cities like New York that have actual plans that they've been working on for years that say these are the rules for AI development. These are how we're going to deal with transparency and accountability. These are the kinds of tools that we're going to use to collect and train the data. And they've had that going on for 3 years. So one of the conclusions of that particular meeting was, hey, we need to start thinking about that too. What are the guardrails that we're going to put in place here in Aurora to make sure that Aurora's AI is the best thing that we can have?
Right. That was brilliant. I think that really kind of puts a bow on the whole talk. Are there any other outstanding issues, Mike, that you see when you were meeting with the folks in the first meeting?
No, actually. I mean, the flow was good. There were a lot of questions. Yeah. And we were able to answer them. We had some fantastic examples of AI. Right. I had somebody ask whether or not there were aliens at Area 51. Okay. So we went ahead and asked that question, and AI would not answer it. Yeah. Basically. But in addition to that, there's just one thing I do want to mention. I published an article over a year ago, and the title of the article was "Who Are the Machines?" And really, it's a historical view of everything back to early civilization through where we're at now, okay, when it comes to machine learning, but also data, all right? At the end of the day, we are the machines. We're the ones that are, putting information out there. And, it's as simple as this. You go to Walmart, you buy your stuff, okay? That data itself now is part of the model, so to speak. Okay, right. But you're the one who bought it, and so forth. So this is just something not to lose sight of. We're part of the equation.
So in a nutshell, we generate the data, and we have lots of data, and now we have this generative AI tool to help us make sense of that data.
That's right.
Yep.
Okay, guys, that was a great conversation about that.
Hopefully, it's the first of many.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.